Welcome back to the Rose Garden Report podcast. I'm Sean Highkin, the author of the Rose Garden Report newsletter, which you can subscribe to at rosegardenreport.com. Free and paid subscriptions are available. The podcast, as always, you can get on the Odyssey app because we're part of the Odyssey family. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. We can grow the page that way. Another kind of Scoot-centric episode today. Nothing's really going on with the Dame stuff, so not really much to say there, but I have on, right after the draft, I had Miran Fader on, who wrote a profile of Scoot during last season. Another one of the Scoot profiles that has come out is by one of my old buddies in the business, Robby Kalland, who's now a senior writer at UPROXX, but, he and I kind of came up in the blog scene together about 10 years ago. Known him for a long time, used to cover the Hawks, so, big NBA guy, really good guy. But he wrote a profile of Scoot for UPROXX that went out the week before the draft. And it got into a lot of really interesting stuff that I kind of wanted to, now that we're kind of in the slow part of the offseason, I wanted to go a little further into. But about just kind of the amount of work and the amount of people that have, made it, so, have been working behind the scenes to make it so that Scoot is going to be successful in the NBA, and just getting into kind of a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and just sort of about the Scoot's preparation, and just kind of how abnormal it is that somebody is this focused on the long-term goals of an NBA career at the age that he's at. We get into a lot of interesting stuff, and then Robby and I also just kind of go off on some other stuff, we do talk a little bit about the Dame stuff, nothing you haven't heard before, because, again, nothing has really happened with that, but it's a really fun conversation. Robby's awesome. You should, I'll put the link in the show notes for the story that he wrote about Scoot last month, so you can go read that, but, go check out Robby's stuff at UPROXX, and, as always, again, subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, all that kind of stuff, so let's get to that right now. Thanks for doing this, Robby.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
So I guess where I want to start, I thought this story you wrote on Scoot that came out, I think you, well, first of all, when did you actually talk to him? When did you actually?
I was there March. It was the end of, it was right after he got shut down by the Ignite, before the very end of their season. So he was still in Vegas. It was right after they ended the season. So we were supposed to run it the day Slam ran theirs, which is why ours got pushed back. But it ended up working out because we ran it the week of the draft, which obviously is a good time to have that go up anyway. So that was, so I went out there back in March. So that was even before the lottery and everything. So there's obviously no conversation about Charlotte, Portland, that sort of thing.
It was a little bit of a different time for you to, because I've had Miran Fader on here before, and she obviously wrote about Scoot back in November, December, when he was first blowing up, right after the Wemby exhibition games, which were also in Vegas. But that was kind of when the world was first finding out about him. I thought when you got him, it was kind of an interesting time to get him, because he's they shut him down for the season, so his G League time is over, and now he's just preparing for the draft process and just jumping to the NBA. And the thing that I thought was so interesting about what you wrote, and I'm glad that this was kind of the angle that you ended up hitting on, and the theme that you kind of kept hammering during the whole thing, is just how much work and how many people are invested in Scoot Henderson making it as an NBA star.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, and it was also it was that brief period right when the Brandon Miller kind of hype train had just picked up, because it was right when the tournament had happened. So it was it was an interesting time to talk to him, because and we talked about it, and it was in the story where it's I was look, how do you kind of put all the noise, it's all stuff that you can't control, another guy rising and people talking, questioning you and all of this. But yeah, it was he has a huge family. I think he has 7 siblings. And so it's just it was interesting to talk. And it was kind of funny. I remember asking him, you forget when you talk to Scoot that he's 19 years old sometimes, because of the way he talks, especially the way he talks about himself as a player. Like you kind of are like, this is a 5-6 year vet, the way he kind of talks about the way he's figured out his body and figured out the way he goes about being a pro. And I remember asking him, I'm from Atlanta, so I always like to talk to Atlanta guys about food and stuff like that. And I asked him kind of like his favorite restaurant from Atlanta. I forgot he had left Atlanta when he was 17 years old. So like he, of course he doesn't really have, he goes back, but he doesn't really have a favorite restaurant. So he's like, my favorite restaurant growing up was the Golden Corral. And I was like, of course a family with 7 kids would go to Golden Corral. That's where kids eat free, like that's like, of course that would be your favorite spot to go like after practice and stuff.
He hasn't been in Atlanta as an adult.
Right.
He doesn't picks.
I was like, why would he have a favorite restaurant? It was one of those things where it's like, because it's like a little bit into it and I kind of forget he's 19. But yeah, I mean, he has this support system around him that's kind of built in because of the family thing. Like his dad's been his trainer for his whole life. His dad and his parents run a basketball gym. So he's like, he literally grew up in a gym, for his entire like high school career, end of middle school. He said that's kind of when he transitioned from kind of dabbling in both football and basketball to saying like, basketball is going to be the sport. So I'm going to work my body and train to be a basketball player. And then, his sister does his styling and he's got all these people around him, but he does keep it pretty tight to the family. And so it was interesting getting to know him because, he seems like somebody that is very loyal once he lets people kind of in, but he can be a little, it seems like it maybe takes a minute for him to build that trust. But once he does, he's kind of all in. I could see that talking with the G League folks. Like he clearly very much had put his trust in them. And I think building that rapport was the biggest thing to letting him take the next steps he needed this second season in the G League, was kind of him putting his faith in Jason Hart, who's the coach, and Pooh Jeter, who I think is an interesting kind of connect now.
Well, now he works in the Blazers front office. They hired him as, I believe his title is, I think he's like, it's like some hybrid job where like, I think he's the assistant GM of the G League team, but then he's also, I think, going to be like a player development coach also. But they hired him, and obviously, like, this is a whole other thing I don't feel like relitigating, but, there was all the talk before the draft of, are they going to trade the pick? Are they going to, get a guy more on Dame's timeline? They hired Pooh Jeter like 2 weeks before the draft, and it was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and I talked to Pooh for the story, and like he just raved about Scoot. So I'm not surprised that he would have probably been in there telling the guys like, this kid is legit. Like he raved about him, and it's kind of funny when you talk to Jason Hart and Pooh and those guys, it's like they kind of like shrugged off my basketball questions. Like it was kind of funny as they were just like, yeah. Like he's going to be fine. Like he has all of the athletic gifts in the world. He puts in the work. Like nobody really needs to worry about his development. Like they're like, he's going to take the steps and he's going to pop. And like, I was like, do you believe the shooting's going to come? And they're like, oh yeah, like he's going to figure it out. Like they have no concern about that. It was like the thing that we wanted to make sure was he was ready as like a leader and as a player in terms of like, as a point guard, you have to be able to tell all of these guys who are 5, 10, 15 years older than you what to be doing. And like, they needed to get him right for that. And they said like kind of his first year, he was real quiet. And they all talked about how the biggest step he took in year 2 was just talking and being vocal and all those things that you need to do as a point guard, especially if you're going to be a star. And they said that was the biggest thing that they saw strides in, was it went from a guy who was, the classic, let the work talk guy. And now it's, he'll actually, he'll tell guys where they need to be and he'll address the team in the locker room. And I remember Pooh talking about, he was like, at our end of season banquet, he grabbed the mic and like impromptu, like addressed everybody. And he's like, that would have never happened 12 months ago. And he's like, and that showed me everything I needed. And he's like, he graduated. He's like, for me, that was graduation for him. As soon as I saw that, I was good. He was like,
that's exactly what I was going to bring up, because the part of their story where you talk about that, because that's in the story. And you say, Jenner and Hart both said the challenge they laid out for Henderson this season was to run the franchise and to make himself locker room ready for the NBA. This is kind of what I was getting at earlier, where it's not just like, yeah, his dad, was his trainer and he grew up, with his family, running a basketball gym and, so he was around the game his whole life. But there was just so much invested, both by his family and by the Ignite and whoever else. There's just been so much invested in like the behind the scenes of, it's not just like, oh, we need to make this guy as good of a basketball player as he can be. It's, we need to make him ready to be an NBA star. And in a way, like it's laid out kind of in a way that I don't really see it laid out, to the degree that it is.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's maybe something that's unique to the Ignite program is, and I think with Scoot in particular, they kind of knew like, all right, this guy's special. Like Jason Hart even told me for the story, I think I have it in there. He's like, I'm not going to coach another Scoot Henderson. He's like, I might not coach a guy as good as Scoot Henderson ever again. And so I think they as a program knew how important it was to have this guy for 2 years.
Was he the first one that they were doing for 2 years?
Yeah, he was the first one they did 2 years. And I think they recognized after year one, they're like, and they see like, okay, he's the number 2 guy in this class. He would be number 1 in most any other class. They're like, we need to make sure that we are doing this right. Like, I think there was kind of an impetus from the inside to say like, this is going to be our best proof point. We've had guys come through and they've gotten drafted high and they've been successful. You had Jalen Green, you had Dyson Daniels. You've had guys come through the program, Kuminga, but like Kuminga didn't really pop in the G League. He actually kind of fell while he was with the Ignite in terms of from where he was as a high school prospect to where he got drafted. And Jalen Green was a guy that, his obviously his talents were clear, but again, it was like, he's still pretty raw. And I think they saw an opportunity with Scoot to say like, this guy can come in and be an immediate dude in the NBA. And we need to make sure he's ready for that. And I think there's some selfishness to that in a good way, in the sense that the Ignite recognize like, this is our best chance to have a proof point for every young star that wants to come out and wants to come through our program and say, look what we did for Scoot, not just as a basketball player in his skill development, but like, this is what we can do for you that's different than a college program. Like, this is what we can do to tell you like, look, we can teach you how to run a team. We can give you the keys and we can teach you how to talk to guys who are veterans. Like, you're going to have to lead the team that has a guy 15 years older than you, 20 years older than you, and you're going to learn how to do that, which you don't learn when you're playing necessarily with other 18, 19, 20-year-olds. It's a little bit of a different experience. And I think that's the thing they're most proud of with Scoot. And I think that's one of the things kind of why they wanted to hit on that with me was like, it's not just, look, he can continue developing on the basketball court and he gets a chance to run a pro offense, which I do think is a benefit of that. And I talked to him about that, is like, he ran so much pick and roll that he had to get better. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't necessarily get that in college if you go to a place that doesn't run a pro style system. And so there are benefits there, but they really hammered like how much they invested in him off the court and just in terms of being a leader and being that guy. And also takes a guy like Scoot who wants to do that. And he is a guy who seeks out those opportunities to get better. And I think that's something that Blazers fans should be excited about, is like, he very much is a guy that wants you to be honest with him in terms of the coaching staff and the front office and everything about like, what can I do better? How do I do it better? He doesn't just want to be told, oh, you're doing great. Like, he wants the kind of nitpick stuff to say like, hey man, we can do this better. And I think that's something the Ignite were able to do. We're like, okay, you played well your first year. Now here's the next step. And he took it to heart. And he talks about, he was in practice and his brother's like, what are you doing? And he's like, calling out ghost screeners. He's calling out ghost defenders. He's like just talking constantly because that's what they told him to do. That's what Hard and Pooh and those guys, they were like, you got to learn to just talk constantly on the court because that's your job as a point guard. And it's something he had to work on and actually practice. And so he was like, I felt kind of insane at times because I'm out here in an empty gym with my brother and my dad. And I'm like yelling and I'm talking and I'm doing all this stuff. But he's like, it's the only way I could condition myself. But like, I don't know how many guys necessarily are willing to kind of do that at that age. And that was one of the things that stood out to me with Scoot, is like, he really is willing to do kind of whatever he thinks it takes and whatever people he trusts tell him to take those steps as a player.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw there was this. I don't know if you've watched this, but there was a. You know how when Mike Schmitz was at ESPN, he used to do those film sessions with prospects. He did one with Scoot a year ago. This was before he took the Blazers assistant GM job. But there was this part of it. I watched the whole thing after he got drafted, obviously, because I've been like watching and reading as much Scoot stuff as I can since I'm going to be covering him now for the next however many years. But when they started talking about his defense, which, just because of his size, that's going to be something that'll probably be an issue, at least early on in the NBA. Mm-hmm. But, Schmitz was showing him clips of, different defensive possessions, and Scoot was like stopping it and saying, hey, yeah, I blew that rotation. I should have been there. So it's like, he's very willing to, say, oh, I need to do this better. And he also, like he said, like, I think in his opening press conference, he said something like, Chauncey Billups is going to get annoyed with me by how many questions I ask him. And then Chauncey has talked about how he was really impressed that Scoot even like knew who he was, because when Chauncey was on those Detroit teams and winning the title, Scoot was like 3 or 4. Like, there's no reason for Scoot to like know Chauncey's career. I know he was Finals MVP and stuff, but like, it's not like he grew up watching those Detroit teams, because he was literally like in preschool when those teams were happening. But Chauncey was like, no, he knew who I was, and he was asking me about my career and about like different games in my career and stuff. And so mentality wise, and just the guy I've kind of compared him to, and he is not nearly as outlandish, but he and Anthony Edwards kind of have similar energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because in hindsight now, it's very funny looking at what the knock on Anthony Edwards was coming in, which was like, does he care about basketball? And it's like, now we know like he's just like a sicko. And so it's like, that was never the knock on Scoot. Like, everybody knew Scoot was a basketball sicko, but like, it is funny. Like when I talked with him, it was like, I tried to do a little small talk, and it was very clear that was not the way to get Scoot to open up. I was like, all right, like, let's get in the bag with like basketball questions and deep basketball questions. And he's just like, go. Yes, he'll just go. Like, I'm asking him about, what'd you learn about running pick and roll? And, he's talking about, okay, I got to see when I should snake it, and I got to see when I should pull up, and I got to see when I should, he talked about tempering his, his speed, which, as a young guy, where athleticism's his number one NBA trait right now, right? Like, the one thing we know about Scoot is he is a hyper athlete, already elite in the NBA, has that. For him to already know, like, I've got to be able to change speeds, to know I've got to know when to put it in second gear and when to go to fifth gear and all that. Like, the fact that he knows that it shows that he is already kind of taking those notes. But yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, he's going to do all that. Like, that's not just talk for a press conference of saying like, I'm going to bug him. It's like, he really is going to be constantly asking those questions, and he's going to want that. And it's funny because the guy who I have talked to who is the most willing to talk about that and seeking out is Damian Lillard. Yeah. Like, one of my favorite quotes I ever got was from Dame when I asked him. I was like, look, like, when you get to that all-star, all-NBA level, how do you continue to get better? And this was 4 years ago, I think. It might have been 2020. It might have been like in the bubble. He was doing the Gatorade thing. Right. And or right after the bubble. And he said, every team's got a scouting report on me. And that scouting report has like 3 things on it. My goal every summer is to take something off the scouting report. It might be as minute as this. He can't hit a 2-dribble pull-up going to his left. He's like, well, I'm going to hit 2-dribble pull-ups going left until it's second nature. And it's like, I think Scoot has that same, like, kind of like sick, like, just determination to figure something out to add to his game. And obviously right now, kind of the world's his oyster in that regard. Like, there's a lot of things he can continue to get better at, but I do feel like as he goes along, he will be a guy that is willing to try to kind of pick apart his own scouting report in a way that not every young star is willing to do, and willing to be not negative about his game, but honest about his game. You know, some guys don't necessarily want to hear the critiques. They don't, they don't want to hear people saying like, you can't do this. And he's like, he's willing to say it. Like you said, like with the defense, he's like, I want to be an all defense guy. And that's probably not going to happen, but like,
he brings up Drew Holiday multiple times.
He does. He's like, he's like, I'm big. I'm not tall, but he's like, I'm thick. I've got, I'm strong. Like, that's the guy I can watch to kind of say like, what can I pull from his game? Now, Drew has like a preternatural ability on that end that I don't know is something you can just copy, but there are things you can copy with him. How does he navigate screens? How does he use his strength in the way that, negate some of the height disadvantages he has? And he does that really well, usually when going up against bigger opponents, not necessarily Jimmy Butler, but like most of them. And so I think he knows kind of, and he's willing to say like, all right, these are the guys I can pull from, even if he doesn't like to say he patterns his game after anybody or doesn't like comparisons to anybody. He's like, I want to be Scoot, but he also knows that Scoot can pull things from other guys.
But you going back to the athleticism stuff for a second, I love this line that you have where you say, talking to Scoot about his workouts is like taking an undergrad course in kinesiology. And it's like, you go on, you talk about like all of the different flexibility, drills that he does, and just, trying to make himself like you talk about how he like stopped eating fried food and stopped drinking soda. Like, even, it wasn't even just like the G League, like they told him to do that. It was like years and years before that. And it's just like, because you look at, going into the draft, like, who are the guys that he gets compared to the most as far as like, the pro player comps? It's like Derrick Rose, John Morant, Russell Westbrook. Those guys have all had, injury issues because of their burst and their athleticism. And so to me, I would look at like, some of the stuff that you detail in here and say, they are so, and this is kind of what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about there are so many people that are invested in the machine behind the scenes of making sure that he is successful, is like, I wonder if they've all, once they kind of figured out that he was like this type of super athlete, they saw, the way that Derrick Rose's career went, when, when he was maybe should have been a little bit more careful early on in his career about like landing after some of these dunks in a certain way. And now, you have 10, 15 years of data on that stuff. And now, there's a whole team of people now that are like, for this next generation who is, this kid Scoot, this is what we really have to hone in on to make sure, like, what if we took Derrick Rose but turned the injury sliders all the way down?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because, I mean, he's talking about, he knows what muscle, he has to work if he can't get his pinky toe to touch the ground right or something like that. Like, he knows what he's got to work, what he's got to stretch, what he's got to strengthen, all of that. And that's kind of where the kinesiology, point came from for me, is I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is fascinating. It's like one of those things for me where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because like,
let me learn about it.
I was like, I'm fascinated by this. Like, keep talking about it. I'm going to keep prodding about it. But he was, he does have that, he does have a trainer that he just works with that is already there. I don't know. I assume he has somebody he consults for nutrition stuff, and will continue to do so. But like, it seems like it's in part just kind of a family thing where they just, I assume they've stopped going to Golden Corral, and they, he eats right, and he's, because I was like, yeah, man, you gotta go to Hattie B's next time you're in Atlanta, and he was like, yeah, and I was like, fried chicken's the best. He's like, oh, I don't eat fried food. And I was like, dude, you're 19, like, it's okay that, but it's like, whatever, like, that's cool. Like, good for you. Like, you're gonna make millions. You're gonna make millions and millions of dollars because of this.
Well, but like, going back to Anthony Edwards for a second, like,
well, sure,
it was a storyline during this season that like Kat was annoyed that Anthony Edwards eats so much Popeyes, and it's like, okay,
yeah, it's like, okay, like, so you don't have to worry about that with Scoot. He's not gonna be hammering donuts or anything in Portland. Like, you're gonna be all right with that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. And I also think the way he plays is a little different. Like, he seems a little more discerning as to when, like, kind of like what I was saying, is like, he seems a little more discerning about when to unleash his full, like, athletic abilities, in a way that, prime Derrick Rose wanted to bang on everybody.
Yeah.
Like, he was going to go and he was going to try to dunk on everybody. And anytime he had the slightest of opening, he was going to go up. And Ja Morant kind of in the same way. And I think, people watch Scoot and they kind of expect him to do that because he can just take off from anywhere. But I think he's a little more discerning with it. Like, I mean, just watching him play in the G League, like he wasn't constantly trying to just, throw down on guys. He wasn't constantly just throwing himself at the rim necessarily in the same way as Ja. And so I think that's also kind of in his corner with this. And part of that is, I mean, he did have the concussion this last year, and he kind of dealt with that. And I think he had to kind of learn, like, all right, like, how do I make sure that I am taking care of myself, not just off the court in the way that I am, but also like maybe picking my spots, and how do I still maximize my abilities with also, saying like, this is maybe not the time when there's two guys underneath the rim to try to go up when I'm not going to have a clear landing space, stuff like that. And I think he's pretty cognizant of that in a way that a lot of those guys who have that ability, because that's your meal ticket right there, is being able to do that. I think he sees himself as not just that. And I think that's kind of why he scoffs at those comparisons a little bit. Like, he doesn't really love being talked about like Ja and Russ and Derrick Rose. And I think part of it is he doesn't like being pigeonholed as the hyper athletic dude. And so I think he kind of wants to show that he's more skilled. And I think that'll benefit him in that regard as well, just from he's not going to try to be that all the time.
What do you think about his shot as someone who's watched a lot of him?
I think it's going to get better. I don't think he's ever going to be like a marksman, but he's also not the guy that has to be a 38% guy. If he can be that 34, 35% shooter from three, that's enough to draw defenders up. That's enough to sometimes force guys to go over screens. That's enough to kind of punish teams from playing deep drop. He's very comfortable with the pull-up mid-range game, so I think he's already got a little bit of that. And like, he's a solid free throw guy. So it's one of those things where you look at the percentages and you say, like, the 3-point shot should be able to go up. And I mean, I'm not a shot mechanics guy, but like, nothing seems broken or real funky or out of whack. It just seems like he's not a guy. He's just kind of got to maybe work on some footwork stuff and getting better balance. And so I think something that happens a lot, and this is something that Russ has always dealt with, is when you are a high leaper, if you do jump a good bit, getting that consistent release point on your jumper is tougher because there's more variance in where you let it go when you jump higher. It's always been a Russ thing. He gets super streaky and like when he's just feeling it, but like, I think his release point's different because of how high he jumps. And I think Scoot, he doesn't jump as high. He's not a Russ jumper on his jump shot, but I think just because he does have to get a little elevation to get it off, I think there's some footwork and consistency stuff that he's got to get for the balance and for the release point to be in the same spot. Because again, the shot doesn't look like it's broken. It doesn't look, this isn't the Michael Kidd-Gilchrist situation where you look at it and you go, oh, that dude's never going to shoot. You look at it and you go, like, that looks like it should go in more than it does. And I think that just comes with some work and continued, figuring out the balance and some of that. Because, he was better last year than he was this year. And he didn't shoot a ton. So, like, some of it's smaller sample size in the G League. A few cold nights can really knock you when you only play, 30 games or whatever, 34 games. So, we'll see where that goes. I think he can get into that mid-30s range pretty comfortably. Like, I don't ever see him being just an absolute dead-eye knockdown guy. Obviously, maybe I could be wrong. But I do think it's just going to come with figuring out some of that footwork and figuring out some of that release point stuff to just get it a little more consistent, because that's the hallmark of great shooters is every time they let it go, it's coming out of the same position from the same height, from everything. Like, I covered Kyle Korver for years, and like the one thing he always talked about was like his elbow position and his footwork. And if he has those two things right, it doesn't matter if he's running off a screen, whatever, if he's got himself square and he's got his feet where they need to be, the right width, like he knows it's coming off the exact same every time. And that's that's the step that's the hardest to do. But again, like Scoot's the kind of guy that'll drill it, I think, enough to take that step. It just might take a couple years.
I'm so interested in how the leadership part of it is going to work, at least right away in the NBA, because you look at you look at the Blazers and, for the sake of argument, let's say that sometime between now and training camp, Dame is traded. He has not been traded right now. We're recording this on July 26th. As of right now, he is still on the roster. There are not any kind of real talks with Miami or anybody else about him being traded. But in the event that he were to be, Nurk is 28, Jeremy Grant is 29. Other than that, it's all kids. So there really is going to be a void for somebody if Dame is gone. There's going to be a void for somebody to step into. And from everything you're saying about how he was able to kind of build, that type of gravitas with, guys who are way older than him, like Pooh Jeter and Amir Johnson, like he'll be able to do that. But it's also like a lot of these guys that are on because as of right now, the roster is pretty much exactly the same except for him and the other two rookies.
Yep.
Like how guys who have been used to Dame for however many years they've been, especially guys like Nurk and Simons who have been here forever. Suddenly now you're replacing Dame with this 19-year-old kid who's suddenly like the vocal leader in the locker room and telling guys what to do. Like, I'm very interested in how that's going to go over.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that when I talked to Jason Hart about it, the thing that he said was what won over his teammates the most was the way he played. And the way that he always was trying to keep everybody involved and kind of, he said like Scoot could have big timed it around there. Like he was the prospect, he was the guy, but he always, he went out to dinner with the team every night on the road. Like he wasn't just like going off to do his own thing because he was the guy. And so I think he will build that rapport quickly with those guys and build that trust on the court quickly. That he is going to, he's still working on some of that feel as the on-ball point guard. That was the main thing on the court they were working on, was like he was off-ball a lot his first year, and they were like, "Here's everything. Like you go run the show." And it took him some time to kind of get the feel for when to go for himself and when to kind of find other guys and when to keep and how to kind of keep everybody happy. Cause that's another thing that as a young point guard, it's hard to get that feel. It's hard to find that balance, that kind of Chris Paulness, if you will, of like, all right, the big fella hasn't seen the rock in 6 possessions. Like we better get him something or else we're going to lose him. It's one of those things where it is a very difficult thing. But it's something he's worked on. He talked about kind of working on is getting that feel for, keeping everybody involved. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing is like, if he can do that, if he can show like, I'm not just going to be out here gunning for 30 a night or something like that on, semi inefficiency and kind of ignoring the other guys. Like if you do it on the court, if you keep everybody involved, if you seem like you're looking out for everybody, it's kind of easy for guys to fall in line behind that. And then on top of that, the work ethic is pretty unquestioned. So it's not going to be, a guy who's, and he talked about this. He said like, look, like if I'm going to get onto a guy about a blown assignment on defense, I can't be blowing those myself, or I at least have to call myself out when I see it, that, and that to me was a big thing when we talked about defenses. He's like, look, like if I'm going to hold guys accountable, if we're going to talk about rotations and I'm going to say like, you needed to be here, he's like, you can't do that and have guys respond to you if you're the one out there blowing assignments and all you're doing is getting on to everybody else. And so I think as long as he continues to do that, as long as he's willing to like put in that earnest work, and from everything it sounds like he does, obviously there's a lot of reason for everybody to talk positively about Scoot when I come in to do a cover story. Like there's obviously everybody wants to do well, but it certainly seemed honest, and it certainly seemed like earnestly what people were talking about was being very impressed by the humility that he showed in the locker room. And that goes a long way to earning that trust with guys, as you know. I mean, like it's one thing to come in, and if you're blasting guys, but you're not taking any heat yourself, they'll tune you out real quick. And like we've all seen it in NBA locker rooms where that's happened. But when the guy is willing to kind of take the heat himself and also kind of try to lift guys up and find that balance. And I think Scoot, it'll probably take some time to build that rapport with everybody, especially, like you said, the guys who've been there for a while, who are used to Dame. It's going to take some time to build it with Nurk. It's going to take some time to build it with Simons, especially because with Simons, there's going to be maybe a little natural friction of who's the guy, right? Like there's just, you're the two backcourt guys. You're Scoot is now being talked about as the face of the franchise if Dame leaves. And Simons is like, hey, I'm the one on a $100 million deal.
Who's also been here for 6 years now, and was like Dame's protege like early on.
Right. And so it's like, it would be understandable. But I also think, I would like to think Scoot's kind of smart enough to know, like, talk about it as a 1A, 1B thing, or like a split dude, like don't come in trying to necessarily say, or just defer. And he might do that and like see how it goes. And I think he'll be smart enough to kind of feel his way around. I don't think he's vocal now, but I don't think he's a guy who's going to come in and demand to be the guy in terms of the one who's talking all the time. I just think he's willing to step into voids for that right now. And so, I think as long as he's not trying to step on Ant's toes, and I think that's the one that is maybe the most delicate relationship to build and will be the most interesting one to follow this season. But you can also see how those two guys can help each other a ton, right? Like Scoot's ability to pressure the rim is going to help Ant get more looks. Ant's ability to knock down shots is going to help Scoot get to the rim. They should work in symbiosis. Like that is a very nice guard combo offensively. Defensively, they're going to have to figure it out. But you can see how this can all work. As long as they're willing to kind of see how it can benefit each other, I think this can work very well. And, from what I've seen, Ant seems like the type of guy who would understand that as well. Yeah. He's played with Dame for long enough to know how playing with another really good guard can help him, right? Like he's the type of guy that if anybody knows what that can do for you, it's probably that guy.
And then what if Dame isn't traded right away? Like what if they go into the season and again, it's late July right now. There's a lot of time between now and October. I have no new information about any talks that have or haven't happened. What if they take it into the season? How is that going to work?
For Scoot, I think would love to pick Dame's brain.
He has said he would.
Perspective of everything we talked about earlier, where he's a guy that wants to do that.
He's done that with Dame before. If you read Miran's story, which I had her on a couple like a month ago, like right after the draft. Yeah, she was talking about how like right when she had interviewed him for that story back in like December. He had sent Dame a DM on Instagram asking him just like for some, hey, like how do I hit this kind of shot? Or like he was asking for like some basketball advice. And Dame responded, and he was like showing Miran his phone, like I can't believe Dame responded to me. Like he was just like super pumped about it. And like so they actually like have a good relationship personally, which is why I always laugh at the. I don't want to get down a rabbit hole of like litigating the way that like the Dame trade request is talked about because like that's all just whatever. But like this idea of like Scoot Henderson is watching how the Blazers treat Dame. And if they don't send him where he wants to go, then he's going to take notice of that. I don't think Scoot is going to think, man, I have to play with Damian Lillard, who has been one of my idols. Like, this really sucks.
Yeah. Again, like from Scoot's perspective, he would be all for that. That would come down to how willing Dame is. But like, here's the thing is like, you've talked to Dame way more than I have, but I, for whatever reason, end up with seemingly a conversation with Dame every year via some brand thing. Yeah. And so I had one a month ago or whatever, 2 months ago, which was interesting.
Like right before the trade request. Because there was that week where he was doing the Modelo stuff.
Modelo thing. Yeah.
So that was like a week before the trade request. So
yeah, it was pretty fun. It was right before the draft, I think. It was like literally, it was the week before. I think it was the Thursday before the draft. I ran it on like Monday or Tuesday. Which was an interesting time to talk to him. But like even I was like, I can't believe he's doing this. Like I know so many guys that have canceled when stuff like this pops up. So like, on those like brand things.
Well, he
like
hasn't done anything since he he wasn't at Summer League. Even it wasn't even like he was there but not doing interviews. He was out of the country. He was gone. He hasn't done any kind of interviews since any of this went down. Like you hear leaks through whoever that are clearly coming from Aaron Goodwin or whatever, but he himself has said nothing publicly.
Yeah, and so it was an interesting time to talk to him. But I think the thing we know about Dame, and this has always been my thing about why I think there should be other teams that are inquiring about him, is like he falls in the KD line for me of like he loves to play basketball, and if that dude is on the team, he's going to show up, even if he's kind of grumpy about it.
Even if he's still here, he's not going to hold out. I've been saying that the whole time.
He's not going to. If he's in Portland, he's not going to hold out. If he gets traded to whomever other than Miami, I don't think he holds out. Like he might be kind of grumpy about it, but also like if Grumpy Dame's dropping 29 a night, I don't think anybody's going to care, because like he's not going to half-ass it on the court. Like that's just not how he's wired. There's some guys you worry about that with. Like, do you want to take James Harden into camp?
No.
Good luck, Philly. Like we know he is a professional at this. He knows how to do this. I don't think Dame's built like that to do it. So I think if Dame shows up, he will do his thing. I don't know if he'll be super available all the time, but when they're in practice together, sure. Like I don't think Dame's going to be like having Scoot come over for dinner necessarily if he's still in town and like doing things that aren't on company time. Like I think he's not going to be going the extra mile if he's there. But like if he's in the building and he's at practice and Scoot asks him something, he'll probably tell him and he'll show him and he'll do that. And like, that's just how Dame is. And so like, yeah, I'm with you on the kind of like idea that he'll check out completely. I don't buy it. Like I get why his side is trying to sell that because they have an objective, but like that's a bluff I'm kind of willing to call.
But as far as like, let's say the opening night of the season rolls around and they are both on the team. How do you see that working fit-wise?
I mean, I would imagine Scoot would be coming off the bench.
I would think so too.
I would imagine it's Dame and Ant and as your backcourt, and those three you can't run together as like a 3-guard lineup that I can see and have that function defensively in any way, shape, or form. Like that's 3 small guards.
They tried that with Norm Powell back a couple years ago.
Yeah,
it didn't
but like,
go well.
even Norm's 6'4".
With CJ and Norm Powell,
because Norm's 6'4" or whatever at least. Like Scoot's not 6'4". I've stood next to Scoot. his hair's 6'4", but he's not. Right. He does have long arms. I'll give him that. But you know, like he can maybe guard 2s, but like don't want him on the wing. And you don't want Ant guarding wings. And
then where does Shaedon fit in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing to kind of figure out exactly how all that would work, but I would think they would probably run the hyper athletic bench lineup of Scoot and Shaedon, and you just are like, go be fast, you just like go do cool stuff on the fast break, and like we'll figure it out later with some of the half court stuff and how the spacing works, because obviously that's your concern if you're running a backcourt of Shaedon and Scoot, is like paint gets a little bit jammed up. But if you threw them out there with some floor spacing bigs, you could make some stuff work. But yeah, I mean, like I think there's a lot of things that they've got to figure out on that end. But I also think no matter what happens, I really think all season, but especially the first couple months is going to be a lot of experiments from Chauncey Billups in terms of lineups and combinations, and like who you see for 3 games here is not going to be who you see for 3 games here, because they're going to be figuring out who is the best together. And they're going to be figuring out, okay, if we're going up against, they're going to want to see these guys playing together against different types of matchups. I think that's the other thing, that's one of the things that when we talk about how lineups fit, it also matters who you're playing, right? It matters who the personnel on the other side is. You can get away with a 3-guard lineup against another team that maybe runs a 3-guard lineup. You can't get away with a 3-guard lineup against the Clippers because they don't have a guard anyway. Like they're running all wings anyway. You're going to get cooked. So it's like where are you going to deploy different lineups? Who is it going to work against? Who is it not going to work against? They're just going to be throwing stuff at the wall for a while, I think. And it's going to be fascinating to watch, I think, as a fan. Like, you're going to be kept on your toes, I think, a little bit, because I think starting lineups are going to change. I think rotations are going to be very different from night to night, as they're just going to kind of figure things out. So if Dame's on the roster, I don't think it changes much in terms of how they approach it. It just means Scoot's not in the starting lineup.
It's going to be I'm just honestly like, whichever way this goes, like if Dame is traded, I'm pretty excited about covering a 27-win team with Scoot and Shaedon just unleashed with no expectations.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, that's the thing is like, it's kind of, I feel pretty confident at some point the trade's going to happen to whatever. Like at some point they're going to get it done. But yeah, I mean, it could be maybe that they are like, look, man, like, can we do this KD style where we get to the trade deadline?
That's where I lean at this point.
Like, let's see if another team just realizes, hey, we need a Tyler Hero. Like maybe let Tyler.
Or another team says, hey, let's go get Dame.
Or let's go get Dame, obviously. But I think maybe if you're selling this to Dame,
right,
you are selling it as, let's see if maybe Tyler can boost his stock some. Because that's the thing that is the hardest about this right now is we just watched Jordan Poole get salary dumped on basically the same deal.
Yeah.
And they are comparable players. Hero's maybe a little more accomplished.
You're gonna get aggregated saying that, and you're gonna have Heat fans in your mentions. I'm just warning you right now.
Well, that's fine. But like what I'm saying is, I just think from a national overview, that's how people kind of view it.
And I think Anthony Simons is kind of viewed in the same tier of it. It's like guys from like those same 2 years of draft classes on like the same relative type of contracts.
Very offensive leaning guys, shooter, scorer, and Hero had a good year last year, but there's just a thing that happens. Like if a team makes the finals without you, there's going to be people questioning like what value is your role to a winning team necessarily. Like you had a good year when they were the 8th seed. Then they make the finals while you're not on the floor, fair or not, that's just a conversation that happens, and it just dings his stock even more because teams like, well, I mean, like if they didn't really need him, like what is his impact on winning necessarily? Which is kind of funny because they needed him to make the finals 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever. Like he was very integral in that. But people kind of view that as the bubble thing. And, everybody has questions about that entire year. So it's interesting to me. I think if you're selling it to Dame, you're selling it as, let's see if maybe somebody decides Hero's the guy that they should go after and give up a pick or two here to facilitate this thing. Because clearly right now there's not a team out there. We just saw the Spurs eat up their cap space, and they were kind of the last bastion of hope there in terms of teams that had an obvious ability to just kind of take him on.
Yeah.
And so it's, if you're selling it, that's, I think, what you're selling. And if Dame is there for the day one of the season, like he's probably there until January, right? Like those types of deals don't tend to happen, but that does open up some more guys that are available to be traded because December 31st
December
or whatever,
15th
is the date for all that. So it's like, maybe this drags on. And again, we have the precedent for it with the KD thing where they kept it real quiet that they were going to maybe trade him. Like we didn't have any chatter about that until maybe when Kyrie got traded, there was like, maybe they'll trade Kevin.
Well, but that was because KD was actually going to be happy to stay there until Kyrie was incapable of acting normal for 2 months and blew the whole thing up. Which, I mean, that'll happen with...
Who among us
Who could have ever seen that? Who could have ever seen that coming?
Yeah, so like... But I'm sure there was a conversation of like, look, like if this isn't working out, we'll move you. But like, we can't get anything. We can't get the best for you right now. And they might do that. And sometimes, and that's, look, I mean, we know how deadlines create action, and we know how a season like last year was kind of perfect for it. And I think there's maybe hope that this season can be a little similar, especially in the East, where like there's going to be a team that's like, hey, maybe we can make a run at this thing. Like there's going to be a team who looks at the East and says, we can get the 3 seed here, especially if Harden gets moved. Like there's going to be opportunity there to say, hey man, like, why don't we go do this thing? Why don't we make a run at it? And I think that's your hope right now. If you're Portland, is like, you can kind of talk Dame into that being your outcome. Cause I don't see another team coming before camp with the best offer. I don't see another team saying on October 1st, you know what, actually we should go after, like, I think it is, hey, we're having maybe a surprisingly good year. Maybe we can sell Dame on us having a chance, and like, I think that's your hope. And if that happens, it'd be really interesting to see how they kind of handle it in Portland in terms of, again, the rotation and how much they're still leaning on Dame. Cause like, obviously last year he was everything. And like, are they still trying to do that? If they're still shifting and thinking future, like, are they still saying like, okay, like we're just going to run our same stuff and do our same thing and, ask Dame to do it all? Or are we going to maybe try to pull some of the reins out of his hands just a touch? And that's a fascinating possibility. But obviously we are 3 months away from figuring out that's a possibility.
Yeah.
How good
do you? Yeah, I'm over. How like we're at the point now where it's like I mean, dude, it's not even August yet. We're at the point now where like the team sent out their season ticket holder like advertising a couple days ago, and like there was like a couple of different graphics and one of them didn't have Dame on it, and people were like reading a lot into that. But then, on the other side, a couple days ago, he posted an Instagram story where his son was sitting next to him, who's like 5 or 6 years old, on an airplane, and his son was wearing a Blazers hat. So it's like, what is that? Like, we're already at the point, it's not even August yet, and we're already at the point where like
silly season.
We're like going over like guys' social media stuff and trying to find like hidden meanings and stuff.
Constantly.
And I'm just like, I haven't written about this in like 2 weeks. I think the last time I actually wrote about like the whole Dame situation was after Joe's press conference out in Vegas, because that was the last actual thing that happened. I'm doing
that's the last new thing.
That was the last thing. Everything else has been like, there's every few days there's a day where like the Miami, spin on it is like the dominant thing in the news cycle. And then there's a day where like the Portland spin on it is like the dominant thing. Like, and they kind of just like take turns, but nothing new is actually happening from any side. I'm doing a mailbag next week on my site. And when I sent out the thing to subscribers saying, hey, I'm taking mailbag questions, I actually said in the email, like, can you ask me about stuff besides this? Because there's absolutely nothing new to say, and I don't really want to litigate hypothetical trade packages that may or may not be on the table. But it's like,
dude, I'm in the mud. I'm doing these like off-season report cards right now because I'm so bored. But like, I did Miami's, and I was like, I don't know, incomplete for trades because like
Portland incomplete. Hey guys, you see what they get back.
Hey guys,
you and I have been
maybe you've heard about. You know how it goes.
Oh yeah, you and I have been in the content trenches for how many years now?
A decade plus. And so it's it's fun, it's funny because we're just we're sitting here trying to figure out what to do. But it was funny because like I went through, because I did like the Southeast Division today basically, and I was like, I got to the Wizards and I was like, oh man, I kind of forgot how much stuff the Wizards have done. It's like that's why I'm doing it, is it kind of refreshes me, because like
it's a reset.
It's just kind of like one of those things that allows me to kind of look back and just reread basically everything everyone's done and get a reset on all the rosters and where everybody's at. And like, I do a lot of these exercises for me, and also because it's like posts to get up.
It's easy content too. People are always going to click on that stuff to be like, hey, well, what did this guy give my team? Oh, he didn't give my team a high enough grade. This guy's an idiot. Let me go bother him on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, which is fine. It's what I signed up for.
This is not the worst month in the world for Elon to make that site completely unusable, because I like don't look at my mentions at all anymore. It's great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't hear too much. Like, people don't yell at me too terribly much. I got to do power rankings next year though, so I'm not looking forward to that.
That's not. Yeah, that's.
It's always a joy.
So one more Scoot thing, and it's something I've been thinking about really since he was drafted. I think there's a real chance that he can be, if he really hits, if he is as good as everybody says he's going to be, he could be the next American, guy. Because if you look at, like, who are all, like, the big, up-and-coming stars that are, like, super hyped up right now? Wemby, not American. Luka, not American. Like, the guys that are entrenched are Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, not American. Zion was supposed to be that guy, but he hasn't been able to be healthy consistently. Ja was that guy for a while, but he's obviously got his own issues going on right now. I think Anthony Edwards is the other guy.
Ant's the guy. Which, I think is fairly clear by the fact that he's the centerpiece of this Team USA team going to the World Cup. But yeah, I mean, look, like Scoot's high end is that,
and he's got the personality.
He certainly does have the personality. It's kind of funny because he went dark for a lot of the season. Like he did the Mirren thing, and then when I talked to him, I was the first one to talk to him. Like of all of these things that have come out in the last, and I get it, they were loading it up for the draft season. But yeah, it was kind of interesting because like as a writer, it was nice because it was like I felt like there was a lot of like ground I could cover that I wasn't asking him about stuff he'd said elsewhere. That's the worst thing to have to go do is feel like he said everything and try to get him to extrapolate on it. And so I think that's the high end outcome, and that's obviously what makes him so exciting as a prospect and as a for Blazers fans is to think like this could be that next guy. And I mean, we're going to see who comes down the road. I mean, there's obviously the Boozer children are very good. And I'm not a prospect guy. So, but like, I think
that kid Cooper Flag I've been hearing a lot about.
He's tall. He's very good. That's all about all I got on him. But it's hard. It's so hard to project those things because again, like nobody would have said Ja Morant's going to be the next American star when he was coming out of the draft. We thought he was going to be maybe a nice player, but we also thought there was a pretty sizable gap between Zion and him. I think was pretty much the consensus there. So it's going to be interesting to see what Scoot can do, and I think a lot of it's dependent on to be the next star. It's dependent on being on a good team. That is part of it. That's going to be the uphill climb for Anthony Edwards. That's why Ja Morant is on that list now is because like, obviously he's putting up numbers, but he's the one of those guys on the best team right now. Like the Grizzlies have been a top 3 seed back-to-back years. And like, unless you're in the playoffs constantly, you can't really be the guy that people are talking about. And you can't really be the guy that everybody's saying like he's kind of carrying the flag. And so that's going to be the interesting thing from a team building perspective is like there's some onus on the Blazers to make it happen, to allow Scoot to be as big as he could be, because again, like he's got the personality and he could have the game. Again, like there's a rawness to his game that is, you can see some of the refinement in certain areas and you can see where it's going. But, as we talked about, the shooting is going to be the biggest thing that unlocks so much more. And the defense is going to be a thing. But then again, like there's plenty of stars that don't play a lot of defense. Like if he can be functional on that,
just putting an effort on that end, which at his size, that's all you can like. Right, you're never gonna be Kawhi Leonard when you're 6'2", but like,
but he's also like he's got the wingspan.
Just not being Trae Young, like that. That's like the bar.
Yes, I'm an Atlanta person. I'm not gonna get yelled at again for this. I do Brad Rowland's podcast too much.
Shout out to Brad,
the God. But yeah, so I'm with you. Like I think it's a chance that he has that kind of upside, and he's an exciting guy to be ready to watch his career grow. Because I think the thing that's nice is like the median outcome is a good starter in the NBA, right? Like the median level outcome for Scoot Henderson is the 15th best point guard in the NBA, which is like, it's not bad. Like for like
who is that right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I always compare it to
De'Aaron Fox before the Kings like broke out.
Yeah, like I think you're talking about that's actually a really good question. I'm trying to think of who is the median point guard right now in the NBA. Part of it is we have a lot of really good point guards right now in the NBA.
It's deep.
So like 15th best point guard in the NBA right now is still going to be really good. is that? Ooh, this is good podcasting. Is people thinking is always what people like on podcasts. I'm just like running through names in my head. Right, Mike Conley is the one that sticks out as like the super meaty. Is like as like maybe like a few years ago.
At this point in his career, yeah.
I think let's say Jazz Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Is like your media, and obviously like Scoot's more athletic than that. But I'm just talking about from a production standpoint. Like I think guy who is a fringe all-star every year. And like in that conversation, I think maybe of the young guys, and like obviously at the All-Star season he was great, but I think maybe Tyrese Halliburton right now is in that like 10 to 15 range.
Sure.
Just because there's so many dudes. Because obviously you've got your guys like Steph and those guys, and then you have Shea, who's like all NBA level player right now. Is Luka a point guard? Do you count him as that? Like, what's his position? Jalen Brunson is like a top 10 guy now. Like, I think you're probably talking about that kind of range is like median outcome is probably a guy who's challenging for all-star teams, depending on what the West looks like. That's pretty good. You know, that's what you want out of a number 2 guy. The high end is, like you said, is like the best American player in the NBA. That would be great. That's a top 10 guy in the NBA. That would be fantastic. That's basically you're talking about his high end is you replaced Damian Lillard. Like, congratulations, you did it, which is pretty much what you would be hoping for here. And yeah, so like I'm fascinated to see how he goes because again, I think he does have a pretty wide range of outcomes, but I think even the most likely ones are still very good, even if he doesn't top out at the 99th percentile.
Well, this piece that you wrote is really interesting. I'll link to it in the show notes and stuff, and
thanks, man.
On the site or whatever. But everybody should go check that out. What else do you have coming up on UPROXX? Anything big?
Ooh, right now it's pretty slow. I'll be honest. We'll be moving some stuff up. I think we've got a W. I don't know if I can say it. I don't want Martin to get mad at me. I think there's a W cover coming. Hey, Martin. There's a W cover coming out. I didn't write it, but we have a W cover coming out sometime soon. I assume like leading into W playoffs, if I were guessing, August, something like that. So we do have a W cover coming out, which is exciting. It's our second one. We did a Enrique one a couple years ago, and now we've got this one. And then I'm doing these off-season report cards. So I'll have one on the Blazers at some point, and it'll be an incomplete for trades.
unless something happens in the next week.
Unless something happens, so
I don't think is going to happen. But
no, that seems unlikely. It's that's mostly what I'm doing. Then I'll kind of shift a little bit into NFL mode for a little bit, but always keeping an eye on the association. But yeah, man, it's off-season time. It's time to kind of take stock of the league. This is I'm looking forward to September, October when we can start really doing preview stuff.
Yeah, and
hopefully have some clarity. Because I was talking with my colleague Bill the other day. I think it was right after Summer League, and I was like, I don't really know what to do because like we got 2 big trades just kind of hanging out there, and it's like, how do we write preview stuff when 4 to 6 teams are probably going to be involved in this stuff, and that's 25% of the league right there. Like that's a sizable chunk that you can't really write about definitively. So I'm just looking forward to some resolution, whether that is guys being in camp or guys being traded and us being kind of done. I'm sure you and Blazers fans are all just kind of ready for the will he, won't he, what's happening in, confusion to be done. Cause I can't imagine. I never really went through that when I did Hawks stuff because the Hawks never had that. We never, we had Josh Smith was on the trade block every year, but like, he
wasn't like
he also wasn't the guy, and also like we all kind of knew he wasn't getting traded, at least internally. Like there were rumblings, but we knew that the Hawks price was way higher than anybody else's on Josh, and so it was one of those things where it's like I never dealt with that, and so like I just can't imagine like. Because every day, and then like you also know that like us idiots in the national media have to fill our time, so we're talking about everything and anything, and like every little rumble, real or not, that we all know is coming from one place or the other. We end up all having to talk about, and it's like
again,
I'm sure it's the same thing over.
This podcast, you and I are gonna. It's gonna happen. I'm just warning you right now. You're gonna get clipped talking about how they should sell it to Dame, and that's going to get circulated by around like Miami media talking about like, oh, they're doing Dame dirty, they need to do right, but like that's going to be a thing. I don't look at that stuff. I have some of it. Some of it is sent to me, so I see some of it, but
I kind of hope so.
They are that it's
well, they're also in purgatory too. Like,
no, I get it.
Like,
I totally get it.
I get it on both sides. Like, I get like they want it to be done because the thing is, the terrifying thing from the Heat perspective, I wrote this in my thing, is like, if they don't get Dame, it's kind of a disaster because like you don't have a replacement for the two guys you lost really. Like Josh Richardson is a good pickup on the vet minimum. Like that's a legit good vet min signing.
Sure.
But like you didn't replace either of the guys you lost in Vincent and Strus. And like you're pretty much banking on adding Dame, which I have to say, Dame, Jimmy, and Bam is kind of the ideal three-piece, like tiered combination if you're talking about guard, wing, big. Like
it is, yeah.
They fit so perfectly. I get why Dame wants to be there. I also get why the Blazers are like, we're not just going to toss him to you because he says he wants to be there. Like I get every side of this. I understand. And I also understand like the neurotic nature of everybody right now, because it is very stressful. Like it's stressful for Portland fans to be like, to feel like people want to trade the best player in franchise history for nothing, or like very little, feel like you're trading him for pennies on the dollar or close to the best player in franchise history. Don't get mad at me if
that part's not gonna get aggregated.
As long as nobody gets like Blazer fan, don't get mad at me if it's a Bill Walton hive in here or something like
that. Part nobody's really gonna have an issue with.
Anyway. But yeah, I mean, like I get why Miami fans are basically saying give him to me, because the alternative is very bad for them. It's a step back from a team that was already the 8 seed. Like it's not great. So I get why everybody's like this. I also just wish it would kind of be over too, but here we are.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks for doing this, man. This was a lot of fun.
A pleasure. Anytime. Always pleasure. And again, like I think I spent a couple hours with Scoot, so it's not like I know him deeply, but I think you will enjoy covering him. And I think Blazers fans will enjoy watching him. And I think he is the type of guy that you want as your hopeful face of the franchise. Obviously, we know anything can happen and nothing is guaranteed in terms of that sort of thing. But I think if you're talking about the work ethic and the drive and the general like athletic ability, like he has that package. It's all about putting the tools together. And he'll at least put the effort in to do that. Whether it succeeds, that is the mystery of every NBA player. But it's nice having a young guy that's not the concern, because it's not always the case. So I hope everybody kind of is able to enjoy that once there's clarity with everything else.
On that note, thanks for doing this, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Later.